Richard Grant, a respected corporate manager, concealed a monstrous secret, an obsession so dark it drove him to murder and cannibalism. For months, he enticed innocent victims with promises of career advancement, only to ensnare them in his sinister trap. But his reign of terror came to an abrupt end with a critical mistake. What did he overlook, and how did his final victim's desperate act unravel the truth? And where is he now? Join me, Andrew, as we delve into the chilling story of Richard Grant and uncover the horrifying reality behind his twisted crimes. Richard Grant's journey into darkness began long before he ever stepped into the corporate world. Born into a seemingly normal family, Richard's early years were unremarkable. He was a quiet, introspective child, often described as reserved by those who knew him. But beneath this exterior, Richard was already grappling with dark and disturbing thoughts. From a young age, Richard displayed a peculiar fascination with the human body, particularly the heart. His curiosity went beyond that of a normal child, often manifesting in unsettling ways. As he grew older, this fascination deepened, gradually transforming into something far more sinister. During his teenage years, Richard's interest in anatomy became an obsession. He spent countless hours studying medical texts, fixated on the human heart. But this was not the pursuit of a future doctor. It was the beginning of a dangerous and twisted fetish. As Richard entered adulthood, his obsession became darker. He distanced himself from others, preferring solitude where he could explore his growing fetish in secret. It was during these years that Richard's fantasies began to take a more disturbing turn. He was no longer content with studying the heart. He wanted to possess it, to consume it. The idea of eating the heart became symbolic for Richard, a way to exert ultimate control and power over another being. In his late 20s, Richard entered the corporate world. His intelligence, charm, and work ethic quickly earned him promotions, and he soon became a manager at a prestigious firm. To his colleagues, Richard was the epitome of success, a man who had it all. But beneath the surface, his dark obsession continued to grow, unchecked and unnoticed. Richard's position of power in the corporate world provided him with new opportunities to indulge his dark desire, and the idea of luring his subordinates into his deadly trap began to take shape. Sarah Collins was 25 years old, a rising star in the company, known for her dedication and hard work. She had been with the firm for 3 years, steadily climbing the ranks, and was well-liked by her colleagues. Ambitious and driven, Sarah dreamed of advancing her career, unaware that her ambition had caught the attention of a predator. To Richard, Sarah was the perfect target. Her ambition and trust in him made her an easy mark. He began to devise a plan, methodically considering each step to ensure that she would become his first victim. Richard started by subtly singling Sarah out for extra attention. He praised her work in meetings, gave her additional responsibilities, and offered mentorship that made her feel valued. These interactions were carefully calculated, designed to build trust and create a dependency on his approval. For Sarah, this was a dream come true, an opportunity to prove herself and advance her career. But for Richard, it was all part of his deadly plan. After weeks of grooming, Richard made his move. He invited Sarah to a private meeting after work, suggesting they discuss a potential promotion, an offer Sarah eagerly accepted. The promise of career advancement was too enticing to refuse, and she saw this as the culmination of her hard work. Richard's preparation was meticulous. He selected a secluded location where they wouldn't be disturbed and planned every detail of the meeting. His goal was to lower Sarah's guard, making her believe that this was a pivotal moment in her career. In reality, it was the final step in his plan to take her life. On the evening of the meeting, Sarah left the office with Richard, unaware that she was walking into a trap. She believed she was about to secure her future, but in truth, she was about to become the first victim of Richard's deadly obsession. In the quiet of the night, away from prying eyes, Richard revealed his true nature. With cold precision, he incapacitated Sarah, rendering her helpless. And then, in a gruesome act driven by his twisted fetish, Richard removed her heart, consuming it in a ritual that symbolized the power and control he so desperately craved. Sarah Collins was the first of Richard Grant's victims. Her ambition, which had driven her to trust him, ultimately led her to her death. For Richard, this was the fulfillment of a dark desire that had been festering within him for years. But the darkness within him was far from satisfied, and the nightmare was only beginning. Richard Grant's first kill had awakened something dark within him. After the murder of Sarah Collins, Richard knew he would strike again. Yet, he also knew he had to evolve, to change his methods if he was to continue his deadly spree unnoticed. He needed a new strategy, one that would allow him to lure victims without arousing suspicion. And so, Richard turned his attention to a new tactic, promising job offers. The lure of career advancement had worked before, but now it was time to cast a wider net, targeting those outside his immediate circle with the promise of a brighter future. Using his position of power, Richard began to craft carefully tailored job offers. These offers, sent to unsuspecting job seekers, promised lucrative opportunities and career advancement. For Richard, each response was a potential target, another life he could manipulate and ultimately destroy. Over the next several months, Richard lured 9 more victims to their deaths. Each victim, unique in their own way, shared a common trait, a desperate desire for a better life. They were engineers, accountants, marketers, each one driven by ambition and trust in the promises made by Richard Grant. Victim 2, Michael Reynolds. A 30-year-old engineer, Michael was lured with the promise of a senior position in a prestigious firm. Eager to provide a better life for his family, he never suspected the danger that awaited him. Victim 3, Emily Davis. Emily, a 25-year-old marketing specialist, was promised a lucrative job in a top-tier agency. Her dreams of success were crushed when she met Richard in a secluded office for an interview. Victim 4, Robert Lawson. A 33-year-old accountant, Robert was struggling to make ends meet. Richard's offer of a well-paying job was too good to pass up, leading him directly into the killer's trap. Victim 5, Olivia Martinez. Olivia, a 28-year-old graphic designer, believed she had landed her dream job. But instead of a new career, she found herself at the mercy of Richard's deadly obsession. Victim 6, Daniel Thompson. Daniel was a 29-year-old software developer who had been laid off from his previous job. Richard's offer of a new start was a cruel deception that would cost him his life. Victim 7, Laura Chon. A 27-year-old communications specialist, Laura was lured with the promise of a high-profile position in a multinational corporation. She was the 7th to fall victim to Richard's insatiable hunger. Victim 8, Matthew Clark. Matthew, a 32-year-old project manager, thought he had secured a role that would finally bring him financial stability. Instead, he became another statistic in Richard's gruesome spree. Victim 9, Sophie Turner. A 26-year-old public relations expert, Sophie was drawn in by the allure of a prestigious role. Her trust in Richard was betrayed in the most horrific way. Amanda Brooks was the 10th and final victim of Richard Grant's deadly obsession. A recent graduate, Amanda was full of hope and ambition, ready to take on the world. When she received an offer from Richard, she believed it was her big break. But what she didn't know was that she was walking into the lair of a predator. Richard's approach with Amanda was no different from the others. He promised her a lucrative position, praised her potential, and gained her trust. But on this night, something was different. Richard had grown overconfident, and in a moment of arrogance, he let his guard down. As the evening progressed, Richard indulged in more alcohol than usual. His normally controlled demeanor began to slip, and in a moment of inebriation, he made a fatal mistake. He started talking about his dark desires. What began as subtle hints soon turned into a disturbing confession. Amanda's blood ran cold as Richard spoke, the realization of the danger she was in dawning on her too late. But in a moment of clarity, she managed to start recording the conversation, hoping to capture enough evidence to expose him. Richard, now aware of his slip, knew he had to act quickly. Realizing his mistake, Richard suggested they continue the discussion in the privacy of his office, a place where he could regain control and silence Amanda for good. Unaware of her recording, he believed he could erase any trace of his confession. In the eerie silence of his office, Richard's facade crumbled completely. His demeanor shifted, revealing the cold, calculating killer beneath. Amanda's attempts to keep him calm only fueled his paranoia. In a final, desperate act of self-preservation, Richard overpowered Amanda, ending her life in the same brutal manner as his previous victims. Confident that he had covered his tracks, Richard meticulously cleaned the crime scene, erasing any evidence that could link him to the murder. But in his haste, he overlooked one crucial detail: the phone hidden in Amanda's coat pocket, still recording his every word. It wasn't until days later, when Amanda's disappearance was reported and the police began their investigation, that the recording was discovered. Her final act of bravery had captured Richard's confession, providing the evidence needed to expose his crimes to the world. But Richard Grant was no longer there. Realizing the net was closing in, he fled, disappearing into the night before the authorities could apprehend him. Despite a nationwide manhunt, Richard Grant was never found. His name became synonymous with terror, his crimes a grim reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind the most respectable of facades. The story of Richard Grant remains one of the most chilling in modern history. A man who used his position of power to lure, deceive, and kill, driven by a grotesque obsession that ultimately led to his downfall. Thanks to Amanda Brooks, the world knows the truth about Richard Grant, but his whereabouts remain unknown, a shadow that continues to haunt the lives of those who knew him and the families of those he destroyed.